Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NicholasMcGirr.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's story in the cemetery. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 31. So this week we're going to be talking about thermodynamics and cold spots, and exactly what they are, how they manifest, what do we use to measure them, all of those kind of things. But let's get through the show notes real quick. Let me be the first time to announce that merch is here, finally. We have actually ordered our shirts, hats, and coffee mugs already to make sure that everything is in tip-top shape. I'm going to post a link in the show notes so that you guys can check it out as well, and that way we can all get our shirts, hats, and coffee mugs together. But anyway, super excited that merch is finally here, and it's basically the Stories in a Cemetery logo, and there's no other advertisement, there's no website link attached to it, there's nothing extra on there other than the super cool logo that April designed. So really excited to see that, and hopefully we'll probably expand on that a little bit once we get through some of the quality control, and maybe add some more stuff, who knows. So moving on, guys, there's no update on Byron Price's The Secret as far as where me and Brian McFarland are in the hunt. Right now we are still kind of in waiting through all the COVID-19 stuff to go to our dig site and actually find out if we are right or wrong. Of course, I feel 99% positive that we are correct, and right now we're just waiting for the city of Charleston to open up. But if you were wondering where we were, how we came about this, go back to episode 16, where you can hear the beginning thoughts of me and Brian starting to work on this crazy puzzle here in Charleston. And then you could actually support the show through buymeacoffee.com, and you'll have access to all of the extra episodes that we recorded just about Byron Price's The Secret. We do realize that it doesn't exactly have anything to do with ghosts, the paranormal, or anything, but it's still putting clues together. So I felt like it was pretty relevant to kind of what my job is at Stories in the Cemetery, which is putting clues together to make sure the haunting that comes through is legitimate. So putting puzzles together, whether they're paranormal or not, is always fun, and we just felt like this was a great topic to continue with, and hopefully we actually have more episodes coming up. But right now, with us being sworn to secrecy, and there's no news because of COVID-19 putting everything on hold, we'll see how it comes out. Hopefully it won't be too much longer before I can put a shovel to the ground. Speaking of buymeacoffee.com, you can actually support the show through buymeacoffee.com. It acts just like Patreon, only I have it set up to where you don't need to put in any of your information. You don't need a per episode subscription. It's not a monthly bill. It's you drop $1 in a coffee pot, you get access to the bonus episodes, and I know that you're supporting the show. So it's not any kind of paid subscription. Again, Stories in a Cemetery is still relatively new, so just $1 in a coffee pot, help support the show, help keep things moving along, just like the ads that you hear in the middle of the show. Guys, I'm looking to categorize the accompanying blog posts on nicholasmcgirr.com just so that you have access to find things a little bit easier. With these new topics we've been talking about with the ghost hunting equipment, I think it would be a lot easier for you to find if you wanted to find out about the spirit boxes, the EMF readers, all of that stuff all in one place, and then listen to the paranormal cases and read about those investigations of specific locations all in one place. So look for that in the upcoming future. That will probably be within the upcoming week that I'm looking to get everything categorized. So, guys, this week I'm going to break down the thermodynamics and cold spots. Now, thermodynamics, it's basically the study of temperatures and how the energy works through it. So I wanted to talk about this because when you're looking for cold spots in a haunted location, it's not necessarily that you're looking for them. A lot of times you hear that they're actually just stumbled upon. I've got cold spots in my house, it must be haunted. You're watching the ghost hunting TV shows, whatever they are. There's a cold spot over here, everybody feel it. And they're not really measuring anything, or they have one temperature gauge where it's starting to drop rather quickly. But of course, it's TV, it's made for TV, Not saying that it's fake or it isn't, but it'd be really easy to hold a thermometer still and to make things move a little bit quicker as the temperature drops down to its average ambient temperature. Guys, I use thermometers on my Stories in a Cemetery ghost hunting experiences, and the thermometers go straight to the guests. Like, we get a basic read, and then I show them how to use the different kinds of tools, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But just like all of the other tools that I use, it's, how do I put this? Some people are skeptic about why cold spots lead to a paranormal experience. We could just put it out there. There's a lot of skeptics out there that believe certain things, and they use thermodynamics, which is a scientific law that we're going to go over, of how to disprove or debunk why a cold spot appears. But let's talk about the thermometers first, because that's important. You need to know what type of thermometers to use. And if you're not using, the right type of thermometers in conjunction with another, then you're just basing things off of what you're hoping to find. So the first thing I do at the beginning of all my tours is I get a base temperature of usually 3 to 4 objects around me with an infrared thermometer. So an infrared thermometer actually shoots a laser out and puts a red dot on an object, a surface, a solid surface. Now what that does is it's going to measure where the dot lands. It's not going to measure what the laser actually cuts through, whether it be open space, open air, fog. It's not going to measure those things. It's only going to measure where the laser lands. So I'll measure the building, I'll measure the ground, usually 2 different types of ground, whether it's asphalt or concrete for sidewalk. And I'll usually measure something of nature. So it's a tree, it's a bush, it's a leaf nearby. I usually get 3 basic temperatures from the infrared gun just to get a base temperature. Then I move on to what we call a psychrometer. So psychrometer actually measures the ambient temperature around the probe that sticks out of the actual gadget. It's meant to measure humidity, but it also gives temperature, which is super important. And we're going to talk about both of those here in a second. But that's the tool that we use, and once I pull it out of my case to hand it to a customer, it's going to start dropping in temperature immediately to get down to wherever the ambient temperature is. So usually, we're talking about things, and by the time we actually start the tour, the thermometer, the ambient psychrometer is ready to go. Once that starts dropping for a cold spot, that's when we start to debunk things again with the infrared thermometer. We start measuring pretty much everything we could possibly get with the infrared thermometer to see if it's just a colder area. Might have a breeze, a draft that might not be, super noticeable would be the right term, I guess. But we're looking for things. We try to debunk it first. I've tested this psychrometer when I first got it with a space heater. So picture a small square space heater that you would just use for a small room. And I've tested this psychrometer within an inch or 2 of the air curtain, the heated air curtain that comes out of a space heater. And it's usually within an inch or 2, you can make the temperature go up or down. So it has to be really precise, and you have to be really into that cold spot to know exactly where it is and if it's moving. So cold spots can move, obviously, but the psychrometer is a great test to see really what's happening. And it's one of the key indicators for us to start communicating. Because what a cold spot does, us believers, we believe that the spirit world or some type of paranormal entity pulls heat out of the air, which is a form of energy, to create that cold spot. So therefore, the absence of heat creates a cool sensation. Now, some of the skeptics will kind of argue with me and say that humidity does the exact same thing. So humidity makes things feel cooler, even though there might not be an absence of heat. It could be just the humidity that makes that a cooler area. And you can argue it back and forth. That's one of the reasons why I like using a psychrometer, is because this way we can gauge it a little closer than what you would actually expect, because it will give you the humidity. So if the humidity is really low and it hasn't really changed since the beginning, and you go into an area and all of a sudden you feel a cold spot, and you can measure it with the psychrometer, and the infrared is giving you temperatures of all the objects around that area, whether it be buildings, a wall, a cold window, you're getting a base temperature all around that cold spot, and it's still dropping in temperature, you have something going on. You definitely have some paranormal activity happening. Guys, let's stop for a quick commercial break. And we're back. Thanks, guys, for allowing me to put little hosts and sponsors in the middle of the show. It definitely helps move things along for Stories in a Cemetery. So we were talking about the types of thermometers and what a cold spot actually is. So the last gadget that I have actually ordered, and it's coming, is a thermal imaging camera. And if you're any kind of fan of the TV shows, you've seen these. It basically gives you a heat map on screen with temperatures of the different colors. So cooler areas would be blue, and the warmer areas would be yellows and the reds. And they actually give you a temperature. So when you see something move, or you have a hovering, cold spot that's a little, more bluish in color, those kind of things, then you can actually kind of pinpoint where to put your thermometers, again, to be able to communicate and to record that you actually have an entity near you or some kind of paranormal activity. I find this super interesting, and I can't wait to show off how I'm going to piece this together for the tour, Stories in a Cemetery, and to be able to use it on a regular basis. I'm using a FLIR camera, and I can't wait to get my hands on this thing, guys. It's really cool. I've watched a bunch of videos on this and to see how it works. I've read a little bit of the manual already, just to, it was online, so I was able to, kind of see how it works and what's going to work for me in the different types of areas that I go into. Because if you've been listening to the show, I normally don't go into buildings these days anyway. I'm usually out on the streets, or I'm in a haunted, alleged area of woods or a graveyard or cemetery, something along those lines. So I need to know a lot about this specific gadget and how I'm going to piece it together, because it is going to work with a cell phone. I do have a spare cell phone lying around, and I'm going to have to, rig things up so that way the battery lasts a long time. Anyway, I'm going to probably do a whole separate show just on this one gadget after I collect some data, and I can share it with you. So it'll kind of like be a product review, and with some actual evidence of what this device is capable of doing for the rest of you ghost hunters out there. So let's talk a little bit about thermodynamics. So I will say the skeptics will always pull a science law as some kind of armor to battle the existence of the paranormal. And cold spots are really no different from that. So it's the law of the conservation of energy that is used to try to disprove paranormal cold spot theories. So there are 3 laws that go into thermodynamics. And this is all taken from the lumenlearning.com website, where it talks about these 3 specific laws. So I'm going to go through each law very, very quickly, and then we'll kind of show our arguments for and against why people could say that thermodynamics is the reason why cold spots aren't paranormal activity. So the first law states, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Energy can only be transferred or changed from one form to another. So kind of think of a light bulb. Think of a light bulb, when you turn that switch, it's not, you turned on energy, the electric current was changed or transferred into light that you can see. So that's basically what the first law states. The second law states the entropy of any isolated system always increases. Isolated systems spontaneously evolve towards thermal equilibrium, the state of maximum entropy of the system. This is an interesting concept, and this is usually where the skeptics will use and pull out the second law, because basically what this is saying is that if a cold spot appears, there must be, in retrospect, a warmer spot. And I tend to disagree. I'll let you sink that in for a second. So I want you to think of a blue ball, okay? The air around the blue ball is yellow. If the blue ball, which we're going to represent as a cold spot, appears, then essentially a red spot, meaning hotter than the ambient temperature, appears as well. And the air around it remains yellow. That's basically what the second law is stating. I'm going to argue that if a blue ball appears, and it means that a cold spot has been there, and a spirit has pulled heat, which is a form of energy, to turn that into a cold spot, then the cold spot is essentially turning the yellow air green. Now, I'm just using basic colors as kind of a mental thought, and if you want to get a deeper picture of what I mean, head over to the show notes for the podcast, and it'll take you over to the blog post. And I put up very basic pictures. And what I mean by when the blue circle, the blue ball appears and the air turns green, that also means that the red ball doesn't exist. So it doesn't need to create an equal amount of heat in another spot in the same amount of space. It just might be a little bit warmer around that cold spot. That's why the yellow air would turn green, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. And the third law, the entropy of a system approaches a constant value as the temperature approaches absolute zero. Nobody's really argued that this is the reason why cold spots are not paranormal entities, so we're gonna leave that one alone. I am gonna bring up again another skeptic piece, only to kind of fight the argument that cold spots are paranormal entities. Yes, heat is energy, and when a cold spot appears out of nowhere, and you can measure it with the correct thermometers that we talked about earlier, there has to be reasons for it. But without some of those gadgets, and without the right thermometers to gauge this with, some people say that the power of suggestion comes into play. So, when you're thinking of the spiritual realm and anything paranormal, it's going to raise your anxiety, and it's going to get your blood flowing a little bit differently. It might give you goosebumps just to think about an experience you've had in the past, and you're putting yourself kind of relatively close to the same type of situation again by going on a ghost hunt. That's going to have the same effect as if there were a draft or a chill. You're going to have goosebumps, your hair's going to stand on end, the anxiety's going to be up, you might get a little shudder, through the body. But the power of suggestion says, if I, as a tour guide, were to put my hand out and say, there's a cold spot right here, everybody feel the cold spot, all of a sudden everybody's going to put their hand in and say, yeah, I feel it. There's a cold spot right here. He's right, there's right. And I'm not measuring it. I'm not using a temperature gauge of any kind, a thermometer. I'm not using anything. But that power of suggestion says, yeah, Nick knows what he's talking about. It's right here. I can feel it. Magicians do this. So if you ever had a magician touch your hand and say, it should be getting a little warm underneath my fingers, or it should be getting warm where I'm touching you, or wherever the card is touching you. It's that power of suggestion that says, yeah, you're buying into whatever the illusion is. But I don't do that on my tours. That's why I have gadgets. That's why I have tools. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. All I'm trying to do is to prove the paranormal world exists. And we have to do that through gadgets. We've talked about this with EMF detectors. We've talked about this with the spirit boxes a few weeks ago. The thermometers are no different, and they're just as important. Because if I can get enough readings and enough cold spots throughout my tours, that's just more data that goes into the existence of the paranormal. Whether it be an entity, whether it be a spirit, a ghost, whatever kind of term you want to throw at this, it's paranormal. And thermometers help us do that. And I can't wait to get my hands on this thermal imaging camera. I can't wait. It's going to be super cool just to learn new things about it. Of course, I'm going to have to read the manual through and through, but I am going to go back to a couple of places where I've had some activity on my own personal tours and my own investigations, and try to use it in places where I've had really cool activity before. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll be able to gather some of that data for you, and we'll have a whole episode just on a thermal imaging camera, and I'll have some images up on the blog post that will accompany that, so that way you can see them as well. And I'll probably set up the phone to actually take videos of the screen that's happening as it comes up, so that way I can rewatch it again and hopefully catch something to show back to you. So guys, that's what I got this week. It's all about thermometers. I can't wait for the new thermal imaging camera to come in. Make sure you guys check out the merch. I want to hear your thoughts. So make sure you drop me a line at the bottom of the blog or podcast where the leave the comments section is. and tell me what kind of thermometers you're using. Tell me what kind of thermometer evidence that you've captured, and what cold spots can you not explain. Have you tried to debunk them with all kinds of questions and you just don't have an explanation for it? I would love to hear those stories. So make sure you drop those in the bottom or the comments, or you can just head over to nicholasmcgurr.com and you can hit the tell me a story or tell me your ghost story tab, and let's talk more about this. This is a full discussion. We've all experienced some kind of cold spot, whether it be goosebumps or a draft, and we were able to debunk it. I want to hear both sides of the story, especially if you're a skeptic. Let's bring this stuff to light, and if you're here in South Carolina, who knows? I might actually go out to your location where you kind of try to debunk things and try to prove it for myself on the opposite direction. But anyway, guys, I can't appreciate you guys enough for coming on to the show. This has been episode 31, which I'm super excited about. We are getting closer and closer to having 50 episodes, and got a lot of new equipment coming. Merch is out there now for all you big fans of Stories in a Cemetery. Hopefully, tourism will open back up in Charleston very, very soon, so I can, start redeeming all of the tickets that have been sold through Groupon, through the Charleston Cavalier Tours website. I know a lot of you kind of have vouchers waiting on hold, and if you don't, you can always head over to Groupon and look up Stories in a Cemetery, and you can usually find a deal starting on Thursday, Friday, and they're usually a little bit cheaper than our normal ticket price anyway. So for you listeners out there that follow me weekly, go ahead and grab yourself a discount on the tickets. I can't say what they are because Groupon does change it from time to time, but just know that you'll get a discount and cheaper than if you were, just going through our regular website. And we don't know how long we're going to, keep it through Groupon much longer. So just make sure you grab those vouchers now, and you can redeem them whenever you want to. As long as you don't go and look at the voucher to redeem it, then it will just stay in limbo until you say, hey, I want to finally take my tour. Tourism's open, it's safe to go out, and Nick's ready to go. So, guys, this has been episode 31. I can't wait to talk to you guys next week, and hopefully it's about some new evidence. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in a Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.